On this Sunday night, the growing dangers of extreme heat.
It's too hot.
More than 100 million Americans swelter under record-breaking temperatures.
Very dangerous and life-critical temperatures.
All eyes on Midtown, the federal by-election in Toronto that some see as a referendum on the Prime Minister's future.
There is a lot of frustration.
Disturbing capture caught on camera.
Dehumanization is the biggest problem. It doesn't matter really what army you're fighting for.
The video footage sparking international condemnation and a military investigation. And the wingman with unmistakable pipes. Meet the octogenarian behind the voice of the Edmonton Oilers.
Gretzky, will he shoot? He does! He scores!
Global National. Reporting tonight, Sarah McDonald.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with more extreme weather across large parts of the U.S. Midwest, East Coast, and here at home. In the U.S., more than 100 million Americans across 27 states are still dealing with that heat and humidity that began last week and that scientists say was made twice as likely because of the impacts of climate change. North of the border, that heat has broken across most of central Canada and the Atlantic provinces. But now millions of Canadians are under rainfall and severe thunderstorm warnings as wet, hot, and humid air moves in. Heather, Yourex-West begins our coverage tonight.
Dramatic storm clouds captured over Madison, Wisconsin Saturday, a prelude to the destruction ahead. In nearby Janesville, a tornado touched down Saturday night. Local officials say there was extensive damage to homes on the south side. Heavy rain causing flash flooding in the city as well. And in Rock Valley, Iowa, floodwaters forced the evacuation of hundreds after a nearby levee failed. Across large parts of the U.S., the severe weather is not over yet. More than 8 million people under a rare tornado watch across parts of New England and the Northeast.
They're getting some heavy amounts of rain, record high temperatures, morning, noon, and night, and a vast majority of the population are facing these very dangerous and life critical temperatures.
It's very hot. It's too hot.
The sizzling temperatures in and around Washington, D.C. this weekend saw a 40-year-old heat record fall, with temperatures soaring to more than 38 degrees. While the heat dome has dissipated over Ontario and Quebec, in the U.S., the sweltering stretch is expected to hang on for several more days, with the most extreme temperatures seen in the Deep South.
It almost makes me want to go home because it is a little too hot.
For many Americans, this heat wave has been dangerous. The Center for Disease Control reporting a stark rise in heat-related emergency room visits over the last few days.
The heat is a silent killer. And we saw a record number of people died last year in the United States from extreme heat, and we're just getting going right now.
Because across both the United States and Canada, the hottest months of the year are still to come. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
As we've been reporting on Global National, scientists are able to predict with much greater accuracy how likely an extreme weather event can be attributed to human-caused climate change. That has not been possible until the past few years. But what is clear is that the planet is rapidly heating. You can see here that all of the years that have been hotter than normal over the past 200 years have happened since around the start of the 1970s, coinciding with the rapid rise of heat-trapping gases into the atmosphere. And another tragic reminder of just how deadly extreme heat is tonight. We are learning that 1,300 people died from extreme heat at the annual Hajj pilgrimage, which wrapped up last week in Saudi Arabia. The ritual sees hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people converge upon the areas around Mecca. This year, temperatures soared into the 50s. In Quebec, a maximum security prison that once held notorious Canadian killers Paul Bernardo and Luca Magnotta has been evacuated because of forest fires. Correctional Service Canada says inmates from the Port Cartier Institution, northeast of Quebec City, were moved to other federal correctional facilities after an evacuation order was issued on Friday. It's the same prison where Robert Pickton was attacked and killed last month. The prisoners are among 1,000 residents ordered out. Several wildfires are burning out of control neutral nearby. But today, favorable winds were blowing away from residential areas. Conditions may not be so favorable for Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party in a federal by-election tomorrow. The Toronto-St. Paul's electoral district has been an easy Liberal stronghold for the last 10 elections. But this race is much tighter. As Mackenzie Gray reports, many see the vote as a referendum on the Prime Minister and his future. Mackenzie.
Conventional political wisdom says not to read too much into by-elections, Sarah, but a vote tomorrow in downtown Toronto could be one of the most important political moments of the year. Toronto St. Paul's has been reliably red since 1993, owned by longtime Cabinet Minister Carolyn Bennett, who's now the ambassador to Denmark, leaving the seat open and hotly contested between Conservative candidate Don Stewart, who declined to do an interview with Global News, and Liberal Leslie Church, the former Chief of Staff to Chrystia Freeland, who's fighting an uphill battle.
There is a lot of frustration, and I think that sometimes it's directed at the federal government, at Mr. Trudeau.
That sentiment pushing the Prime Minister to the back of any pitch Church makes to voters. Just look at her lawn signs. Only a tiny Team Trudeau logo. A massive departure from elections past.
I've always liked Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party, but I think he maybe has overstayed his welcome. 8 years is a long time.
8 years, you have a Liberal government, then people get sick of the Liberal government, then you go to 8 Conservatives for 8 years, and there's sort of a balance there.
And with voters feeling like that, it would take an Edmonton Oilers-like comeback to keep the same 25% margin the Liberals won by in 2021. Over a dozen cabinet ministers have come to campaign for Church, and senior Liberals that have spoken to Global News say that's helped give the party confidence they'll hold the seat.
The terrorist entity of the IRGC.
That prediction aided by the recent announcement that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has been listed as a terrorist group, helping in St. Paul's as the riding is the 5th largest Jewish population in the country. But more traditional pocketbook issues are still top of mind.
We have about 60% of the households here are renters, which is high even for Toronto. And the cost of rent, the cost of housing is the number one thing that you hear here across the riding.
One challenge for voters tomorrow might just be finding out who they want to vote for on the ballot that will be a meter long, Sarah. 84 registered candidates in total, 76 of whom are running in protest for electoral reform.
A meter long, that is lengthy. Mac, you've mentioned what's at stake in the riding, but what are the political ramifications, in particular for the Prime Minister, depending on what happens tomorrow?
Well, they're vast, Sarah, including the potential for private and public calls from Liberals, many of whom have been remarkably loyal to the Prime Minister, for him to resign if they cannot hold on to this riding. Now, that seems unlikely, but it can't be ruled out, especially with the Liberals down 20 points nationally. Now, if it's just a close win for the Liberals, the most likely option, you probably won't see public calls for Trudeau to leave, but there certainly will be a lot of current Liberal MPs, particularly those in toss-up ridings, thinking about their political future. Because if you can't win in downtown Toronto as a Liberal, how can you win traditionally tight races? And there's always the possibility, Sarah, that the Liberals outperform the polls and win by a comfortable margin, which would quiet some of the Prime Minister's critics for now.
We wait and see. Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mac. In the UK, a 4th Tory is being investigated in a gambling scandal plaguing the governing Conservatives during an election. The party's chief data officer, Nick Mason, is the latest to be named in the British gambling watchdog's inquiry. It's looking into alleged bets made by Conservative members over when the election would be called. According to British media, Mason allegedly made several dozen bets before Prime Minister Rishi Sunak triggered the campaign. It's the latest setback for the Tories, who face dismal polling numbers ahead of a potentially historic defeat in next month's vote. To breaking news out of Russia now. Armed militants have attacked 2 Orthodox churches and a synagogue and have opened fire on police in the Southern Republic of Dagestan. Witnesses recorded video of the shootout with police. Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee says at least 6 police officers and a priest were killed. At least 1 church and a synagogue were set ablaze. Tandem attacks in 2 cities appear to have been coordinated. Russian authorities say 4 attackers were killed, but others have escaped. A search for the remaining suspects is now underway. There has been no immediate claim of responsibility. In the Middle East, violence and uncertainty continues to hang over the crisis in Gaza as peace talk efforts between Israel and Hamas stall. Last night, an Israeli airstrike hit a UN building in northern Gaza, killing several people, according to witnesses. And in the occupied West Bank, Israel Defense Forces are investigating a troubling incident caught on camera. It involves a wounded Palestinian man strapped to the hood of an armored vehicle moving through the streets of Jenin. Redmond Shannon has more and a warning first. His story contains disturbing images.
A wounded man strapped to the hood of an Israeli military vehicle. The family of Mujahed Azmi says he was injured in an Israeli raid in the occupied West Bank. His cousin says Israeli soldiers took him away before an ambulance could arrive. The Israeli Defense Forces say the man was a suspect during an exchange of fire in the Palestinian city of Jenin. After the video emerged, the Israeli military said it would investigate, adding that the conduct of the forces in the video of the incident does not conform to the values of the IDF. The injured man was eventually handed over to the Red Crescent.
Indefensible, and the IDF is not defending it. Secretary of State Blinken has been saying that dehumanization is the biggest problem. It doesn't matter really what army you're fighting for.
Israeli forces regularly face accusations of human rights abuses in the West Bank. Violence has increased markedly there since the October 7th Hamas attacks. The UN says more than 500 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since then. Hamas says 75 times as many people have been killed in Gaza. A UN building being used as an aid centre was struck there overnight. The IDF says it was also a base for terrorist activities. Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu has suggested Israel may soon shift some of its focus to the fight against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And for the second time in a week, he accused the United States of dramatically reducing its military support for Israel.
We generally do not know what he's talking about.
Netanyahu's accusation coming as his defense minister Yoav Gallant heads to Washington.
It's clear that the U.S. administration prefers to deal with him. They find him to be, look, he's tough, but he's a straight shooter.
Gallant says he will discuss the next phase of the war in Gaza with U.S. officials. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Back in Canada, another pro-Palestinian encampment protesting the war in Gaza has risen in downtown Montreal. Organizers are demanding Quebec's pension fund manager divest from dozens of companies with ties to Israel and stop future investments tied to what they call human rights and international law violations. The camp comes on top of a similar protest at McGill University that's been ongoing since April. Another at the University of Quebec in Montreal ended earlier this month after the school satisfied most of the protesters' demands. Well, from party to potential prison time, more than a dozen people have been arrested in Greece on arson charges. Coming up, the luxury yacht excursion that allegedly sparked a fireworks show that nobody bargained for. Plus, the frantic search for survivors as a landslide sweeps the Swiss Alps. That's after the break. In southern Greece, 13 people have been arrested and charged with arson after allegedly starting a forest fire from a luxury yacht on Friday. The group of passengers and crew members appeared in court before a prosecutor today. They are suspected of launching fireworks from their boat, sparking a blaze on the island of Hydra. The fire was contained, but not before leaving parts of the island's only pine forest charred. The incident comes as another intense heat wave grips Greece, with dozens of fires breaking out across the country. And parts of Switzerland have been devastated by floods and landslides caused by heavy rain. In the Swiss Alps, at least one person has died and 2 others are still missing tonight after a rock slide wiped out parts of one village in the south. Hampering rescue efforts, many roads are either closed or impassable. And in Asia, rescue and relief efforts are ramping up in central and southern China after days of torrential rainfall there. More than 50 people have been killed by flash flooding or landslides. Tens of thousands more have been forced from their homes as major roadways collapse and large swaths of farmland are swamped. Officials say the rain isn't expected to ease until midway through the week. Feeling the heat ahead, how extreme heat is impacting our food from farm to store to table. Stay with us. A memorial service was held today for Ontario police officers and civilian members who died by suicide. Hundreds of people paid tribute to 51 officers today, including family members, colleagues, and dignitaries. The event is the first of what will be an annual one. Organizers say the trauma officers and civilian members experience on the job can significantly impact their mental health.
Because of their devotion of duty, they saw things and had experiences that impacted them deeply. Simply put, they experienced trauma that human beings are not naturally equipped to experience without consequence.
The memorial recognizes the positive impacts of the lives of the fallen officers and recognizes the grief felt by their loved ones. If you've been to the grocery store lately looking for olive oil, you'll know how expensive it has gotten. Olives are highly susceptible to extreme weather, and excess heat can severely impact olive production in countries like Italy, Spain, and Greece. But it's not just olives. In fact, so much of the produce we depend on is highly vulnerable to severe weather. And as Kyle Benning reports, the farmers who bring us our food aren't immune either.
Many were looking to beat the heat over the last week, but for Canada's farmers, there's little wiggle room for time away from the fields. The late spring, early summer heat forcing those like John Reeser to start picking their fruit earlier than normal.
The downside to it is that our season is likely going to end early, and we like to try to have strawberries ready for the Canada Day long weekend.
But the shorter season and limited supply could have an impact on prices. A similar phenomenon is taking place with olive oil as a result of fires and warmer temperatures in Europe. According to Statistics Canada, 1 litre of olive oil saw an average price of around $9 between 2017 and 2023. But over the last 6 months, prices have continued to rise from $14.33 in December to $16.32 in April.
The more we do now to adapt to climate change, the better farmers will be and ranchers, and also the less costly.
Farmers for Climate Solutions is calling for further investments by governments to protect agriculture from the costs of climate change. While evidence of those impacts can be seen in crops with less moisture, it can also have an impact on people working in the sector.
We have to understand that we're not just talking about the actual crops being lost, we're also talking about if it's too hot for someone to safely go into the field to harvest, that results in crop loss.
And while many have seen impacts on their crops from fires, droughts, or floods, experts say action can still be taken to protect Canadian crops from further harm.
Canada is extremely well placed to have a bigger portion of its plate that comes from Canadian farms.
Geneviève Grossenbacher says that includes producing enough food for the country's consumption and making public investment in climate change adaptation to ensure Canadian farms can withstand the costs of doing business with more extreme weather. Kyle Benning, Global News.
Gretzky, will he shoot? He does! He scores!
The golden voice that never gets old. Next, meet the longest-serving wingman of the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers have touched down in Florida ahead of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final against the Panthers. It is something that seemed nearly impossible after they lost the first 3 games of the series. Yet, here they are now, 1 win away from bringing the Cup back to Canada for the first time in 31 years. With how much is at stake for both teams, it could be one of the greatest games in hockey history. And as Jeff Semple reports, few are feeling the hype as much as the former longtime voice of the Oilers.
Wow.
Well, here we are, the 5 Stanley Cup rings.
82-year-old Rod Phillips is an Oilers legend, with the Stanley Cup rings to prove it, though he never actually played.
So the Oilers on the power play with...
For nearly 4 decades, Phillips was the voice of the Oilers. His play-by-play career began in 1973, before the Oilers were even part of the NHL.
Curry, score! Across the line, shoot!
The Hall of Famer announced 3,542 Oilers games and wasn't afraid to call it straight.
I mean, if that's a penalty, I'll eat your shirt. It's gravy stain on it. Yeah, I know.
When he retired in 2011, the team wore Phillips jerseys for warm-up. His banner hung alongside the all-time greats, including the Great One.
You covered the Oilers dynasty during the 80s. How does that team compare to the group that you're seeing on the ice today?
I don't know if you can compare the team today with the team of the 80s, because if you did, you'd have to say, well, you got to win 5 Stanley Cups. So that might be a little unfair, but both generations are truly tremendous teams. It's just fun watching the team grow. That's the thing that is enjoyable for me.
1945, the last time that a team came back from a 3-game deficit to force a Game 7, you were a toddler.
I was 3 years old.
Yeah. What do you make of this comeback story?
Oh, well, it's just, it could be the story of the decade. It could be just fabulous.
What's it been like for you to watch the excitement?
Oh, I mean, I'm just thrilled. I get goosebumps thinking about it, and we should appreciate it and enjoy it, because you're going to have these memories for the rest of your life.
The Edmonton Oilers have won the Stanley Cup.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Edmonton.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Sarah McDonald. Tonight's Your Canada is Buena Vista Park in Edmonton, which was packed with Oilers fans at the city's annual Pets in the Park Festival, which raised money for the Edmonton Humane Society, one of the city's largest animal shelters. Thanks for watching. Donna is back tomorrow. Have a great night.